All right, we are live.
Good evening, everybody. I call this meeting of the Gloucester Community Preservation Committee to order at 6:07 on August 3rd. This meeting is recorded by video and audio in accordance with state open meeting law. Consistent with the governor's orders suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law and banning gatherings of more than 10 people, this meeting will be conducted by remote participation. If you are calling in on a phone, you can press *9 to request to speak. If you are watching on a computer or device, there is a raise hand button that you can tap or press to request to speak. Please use either of these options during oral communications to be recognized to speak. Any questions so far from anybody on the committee? If not, we will proceed to our agenda. Tonight is the night that we are going to review one last final time our open applications for the 2021 round of proposals for community preservation funds. This is the meeting where we are opening comment to the public, and we encourage anybody to chime in support of projects, against projects, with questions about projects, and we'll answer them to the best of our ability. We will not be voting on funding for projects tonight. Tonight is reserved for public comment, for discussion with the committee, and one more month of deliberations, and we will make final proposals to the City Council for funding at our next meeting, which is scheduled on September 21st. So the agenda for the evening, the first
Matt,
item, yes.
Sorry, before we get rolling, I just want to remind you that we should do roll call, like a attendance by roll, so that if people are calling in, they can know who from the board is here.
Thank you very much. So we will call a roll call right now. Jamie, do you want to run through that, or shall I?
I can certainly do that. I always have a spreadsheet.
Well, I'll do it. And so as I call your name, say present, or I'm here, or anything you wish. Hank McCarl.
Present.
Bill Cuff.
Present.
Pam Toby.
Here.
Heidi Wakeman.
Present.
Carrie McKenna.
Yes, here.
And Jennifer Lee Levitz.
Here.
Bob Whitmarsh is absent. Matt Lundberg is here also. All right. I'm going to actually, in case there are folks who are connecting and wish to comment, I'm going to let you know what the order that we're going to discuss these proposals in. The order is as follows. Annisquam Village Church will be first, followed by the First Parish Burial Ground application, the Gloucester 400 applications after that, then the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation, the Hammond Museum application will be after that, Ocean Alliance, the Saunders House murals, and then Schooner Adventure, and finally the Trustees of Reservations application for the Ravenswood Park parking facility. So that's the order of events. We will start with the Annisquam Village Church proposal. In overview, the proposal is for restoration and renovation work to be done on some of the church's exterior, specifically downspouts, clapboards, some work on the front doors to get them into an ADA compliant situation, and shutters. The total project budget is $48,199. The AVC board that's applying has requested $15,000 in CPA funds, which is 31.1% of the total. Any comments, questions from the committee members? Anybody like to speak up on this project?
So did we ever get any information from Chip or any kind of legal thought on whether we can do this or not?
Yes, we did. And either Pam or I can speak to that. Pam and I asked Chip to review the application, and the court precedent that was similar, which was for a project that had been proposed and approved in Acton for work done on a church there a few years ago. That project resulted in a suit brought by some residents, taxpayers of Acton, and the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court ruled in favor of them and had an injunction to prevent funding, and then the church subsequently revoked their application. Chip looked at this one and said it is quite different, but he gave the following for us as a committee to consider. There is an anti-aid amendment in the Massachusetts Constitution, which was passed some time ago, basically to ensure that the state wasn't funding religious activities, and to define for the purpose of this and similar CPC projects, whether a project is violating that anti-aid amendment. The court case, there was a court case in 1981 that had to do with the city of Springfield funding some church activities. They said there's a 3-factor test. And the 3 factors when it comes to a city making a grant to a project are the following. The first one is, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't exactly how it's written in the 1981 decision. Is the first factor is the purpose of the grant to found, maintain, or aid the church? And so if a church is looking to get started to be able to provide church services or to maintain its ability to have church services, then that's an issue. If it's for historic preservation of a building, as long as it's not specifically of pieces of the building that are religious in nature, then that, in Chip's opinion, Chip Payson, our counsel, that is all right for this project. The second factor in the 3-factor test is, will the grant substantially aid the church? Now, in this case, the Annisquam Village Church is requesting $15,000, which is for less than 1/3 of the total project cost. And as previously mentioned, it's not in support of core religious services. They're not looking to fund Bibles. They're not funding the restoration of stained glass windows that have religious artifacts or implications on them. By the way, that was the main problem with the Acton case that went to the judge a few years ago. It's simply for building preservation. So Chip thought that one was okay too. And the third factor in the 3-factor test was, will the grant risk political or economic abuses? And one of the explanations of what that is would the public's liberty of conscience be infringed? Does it cause the public uproar or distress because city funds are going to a church to further the pursuit of any particular religious purpose? And lastly, does it entangle the city with the church? Ironically, in the Acton case, Acton tried to solve this problem by requiring the church to come under the historic district of Acton and therefore be required to submit any kind of building improvements to comply with the historic district. The state Supreme Court said that's actually a problem, because now you are having city oversight of a religious institution, so you really can't have that either. So again, Chip's observation on this was that since this is for shutters, downspouts, clapboards, front door, and ADA compliance, it's not it doesn't risk political or economic abuse unless there's a great uproar against it. I mean, he didn't think it was something that we have to worry about, but those are the three factors that each of us should also consider when we are considering whether this project is in compliance with the statute. Sorry for the long-winded explanation, but that's the answer to the question, as Pam and I got it. How'd I do, Pam?
That was great. Good
Great.
job.
Thanks.
Yeah, Matt, I thought you did a good job. I read the email that Jamie sent out in June about the issue back in 2018. And I was curious, what was the result of back in 2018? Because in reading it, it appeared that the CPC gave a grant of $30,000 to the Ennisquam Village Church, and then received that letter from the Watchdog Group. What was the result of that letter, and did the other grant go through?
Good question. Jamie, can you refresh since you're our historical reference here. I know that CPC approved the 2018 application for the Ennisquam Church. I don't know what happened with the letter that was filed.
My recollection is that it was just kind of filed. And I don't have recollection of a response being issued. And we have not received any additional follow-up from the Watchdog Group. There was no problem. There was no like community follow-up or outreach done. And I was able to issue payment for the grant.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
Yep. And actually, now that, and I'm going by memory, Pam, so maybe you can reflect this, but Chip resent us his opinion from back in 2018, as well as the letter that prompted it, which was from the Freedom of Religious Foundation in Madison, Wisconsin, I think. And so we received a letter from them. City of Gloucester replied stating that for the reasons that I just overviewed with respect to the Massachusetts laws, that we did not, that project did not conflict with the anti-aid amendment of the Massachusetts Constitution. So City of Gloucester did send the Freedom from Religious Foundation a letter for that in 2019. I don't believe the Freedom from Religious Foundation pursued it any further. I think that letter was the last piece of that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
You did a great job of summarizing Chip's legal opinion, Matt. Thank you.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on TV. All right. So to the project itself, any comments, questions, support? Oh, I recognize Bob Whitmarsh has joined. Bob, just say you are present.
Yes.
Thank you.
Good evening, Bob.
All right. Any comments on the Ennisquam Village Church project? Okay. Pam, is there anybody from the public who wishes, or excuse me, Jamie, anybody from the public who wishes to speak about the Ennisquam Village Church project?
I do not currently see any hands raised.
All right, then we will move along to the next project on the list, which is, excuse me, the First Parish Burial Grounds project. I think we spoke about this one fairly completely at last meeting, and total project cost is $9,800. They've requested CPA funding for that entire project. It is, and I will just briefly summarize it in case anybody is joining from the public. It's funds to support the restoration of a number of gravestones from the First Parish Burial Ground in Gloucester. And it's modest in scope, but well thought out. We've had letters of support from several folks, including one that was received just recently. And that's the project. Any questions, any comments? All right, Jamie, anybody from the public who wishes to speak on the First Parish Borough Ground Project.
I do not see any hands raised.
All righty. On to the Gloucester 400 project then. The Gloucester 400 project is requesting just under $50,000 of CPC funds for a $90,555 project. So the CPC is just over half of the project funds required. The project is well documented on the Neighborly site. It is to preserve, enhance, restore, and conserve historical documents in a variety of formats, some audio, some video, some photography. There are elements of the project that include physical item restoration. There's also components of the project that are digitization of elements of these works. And I think that's enough of a summary, I think. Is there anybody in the committee who would like to speak about this project? Hank, you go first.
Yeah, I guess I'm on here. One of the things we have to be careful about when they digitize anything, and that is they always get locked into a particular era of digitization. Initially, they were putting things on tape in digital format. Then they moved to discs of one kind or another. Then they've moved to hard drives. Then they've moved to put it up in the cloud. The problem is one has to continually keep digitization up with whatever the current technology is for it to be recoverable. It's a strange thing. You think about preserving history, but the best way to preserve documents apparently is in hard copy, because that can last a long time, hundreds of years, and sometimes thousands of years. Whereas if you put in digital format, it has to be continually moved to another format the whole time. So you need, as part of this, we need to have some idea of how they're going to digitize it, how they intend to maintain it, and for what period of time is it relevant.
Good point.
Great point. Pam, I think you had a comment, and I'd like to respond to Hank's too, but Pam.
Oh, you go ahead. Mine's a little bit more, a little
yeah.
different.
I agree 100%, Hank. As background, I spent the last 20 years in audio and video restoration work. At the end of the day, even if it's digital, it's sitting on something physical. It's on a server somewhere that needs to be maintained, that may have failures, and it needs to be fault redundant. And so and you can't rely on it being the only copy, because as you say, things go wrong. So I believe that they have a fair amount of information in their plan about where this is going to reside. I'd like to reread that to make sure I understand it. I'm not remembering it, and it's a pretty lengthy application. So a significant concern.
I do think that they have in there how they're planning on doing it. I too can't remember. I wish I had reread it before tonight, so it'd be more top of mind. But I'm pretty sure that they were pretty thorough in how they were planning on preserving it. And maybe, could it be through the library that they were going to be working with? I mean, I guess I'd have to read it. I'm not sure, but
Right.
It's certainly, I think that Hank brings up a good point, but I think that it sounded very reasonable to me at the time that I was reading it. But that being said, I would like to go back and read
Right.
it.
In the project narrative, it says they are partnering with the library, and the Sawyer Free Library is well established in position to maintain the digital collection server and platform. I think we need to know more about what that means. There are good ways to do this and much better ways to do this. So I'll I'm the CPC contact on that. I'll get more detail and pass it back to the committee for the next meeting.
I do. I also just want to remind everyone of Stuart Saginaur's email
Yeah.
regarding this project
Right.
that specifically indicates digitization is not an eligible expense.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we can be mindful of the concerns or in discussing digitizing, but it really isn't something that the CPC would be funding directly.
Right.
Yeah, that was my point. That was what I was gonna raise. So I mean, because of Stuart's comments, I was thinking maybe we could redirect their budget to suggest maybe we fund the other conservation pieces that are on there that are not the digitization. It would result in less money going to them and they would have to fill a gap a little bit, but just to kind of be respectful of what is eligible and what is not eligible.
So let me ask this, might it ever be looked at as digitizing is a new way of the future, and that perhaps this is how we're going to be preserving some of these historic records? And in the past, it hasn't been, so it's been a hard line that no, it won't be funded. But is there any wiggle room there to make a case for this could be the way of the future? And I guess that's a little bit counter to what Hank was saying, but I feel like it's all kind of interconnected there.
Yeah. It might be, but it's not according to the Community Preservation Act.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what Stuart Saginaur's point was when he advised on that. I know that's certainly what the applicants feel. They believe it's the best way to preserve these documents for the future. Documents is not a general enough word, but for example, the video interviews that were done, those are on VHS tapes right now, and that's not great either. So it's a tough question. There's no doubt about it.
So might it be that we offer them money for something else so that I think you said this already, that they should redirect other funds to this portion and see if there's something else they can qualify for from us.
Well, I'm looking at their application. I think that's what Pam had said too. And
Right.
I'm looking at their application. If you move around the pieces of the work they need to fund and avoid digitization and have CPA money only go towards restoration, that I think is appropriate here. Pam, I think that's what you were suggesting, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I did the math and there's 2 pieces of conservation that are on there that don't have CPA listed next to them. And it would be less money than what they're asking for. I think it'd be like 8,000, a little bit more than $8,000 less than what they'd ask for initially. But there are opportunities in the budget where it looks like we can plug in some funds if we approve it.
Yes, go ahead, Jennifer Lee.
I wonder, I was trying to make it broader. Is there something that they did not ask us for at all that they didn't because they were asking us for this? Someplace else where they could qualify, because they need a lot of money for this,
Right.
for these programs. Is there something else in their entire programming where it might be appropriate to use our money? And if we tell them they can't have the document money, the digitization money, maybe they'll look for something else.
Yep.
So that would have to be an adjustment to their application, and can they still do that at this point?
I believe they can. Jamie, are there specific rules regarding any adjustments before we vote next month?
I mean, if only, then it would sometimes be a lot less gray. But and in the past, there's also been, the CPC has had the capacity to say, we're making a recommendation to fund these items. So yes, it could come as an application, they could come in and adjust their budget and that wouldn't be a problem. We can certainly still do that within the software. There's no rules against it. It's pretty common practice that as applicants meet with you all, you know, things get fine tuned or adjusted, but it could also just come as a recommendation and say that, like in your vote, that this is what you are funding.
Yeah.
So it would really be up to you all.
Okay,
Even if it's not, like, if it's a new piece of, like, a project that wasn't initially listed, do they need to submit any additional documentation about it, or would you be okay if we just heard what they wanted to fund that might not be included in this original application and just recommended it? Are you comfortable with that?
Again, gray areas. I think it would kind of depend on the extent to which it varied from the original application, right? Like if it's not something that really was covered by the eligibility piece, right?
Okay,
If it's really far out there, then for me, it would, you know, off cycle or coming under so that it had the eligibility review would be a little bit better. But if it's really still in touch with the nature of the original request and just is maybe a specific piece of information that wasn't detailed previously,
okay,
that for me would be fine.
okay.
all right, so I'm the contact person on the project. I have 3 notes here. One is provide more detail on the digital storage of this project and how it's going to be maintained and accessed and you know, how thoughtful is it with respect to long-term preservation. Second one is to discuss redirecting the budget to non-digitization tasks in their budget. And the third one is there anything else that we can fund in your project that may not have been mentioned here, with the caveat that if that does require a new eligibility review, that perhaps we don't put that on this round and consider it for an offsite. Good. Okey doke. Anybody got a hand up, Jamie?
Nope, not that I can see.
Any other comments from the committee?
I don't feel it's meeting eligibility because it is documents and I don't see where that's one of the categories that fits the CPA funding.
So the project, so I think, let me rephrase, Bob. So you don't think the project passes eligibility for historic preservation in total, or just particular items of it?
Well, I think that if it's documentation, it's a very hard thing. If it, you have a building, if you're creating open space, if you're, creating housing, those types of things, those are earmarked. I don't see where this is one of those categories where it can fit that type of thing. That's where we have to be sure that they get away from this digitizing and try to come up with something that's that fits the categories that we fund. I think we have to review those categories and make sure that they're applying into those categories.
Gotcha. So
and I'm sure that there's flexibility, like someone has said, that they're going to need money for a lot of other things.
Yeah. Yep. Good. It's certainly worth another question back to the CPA, I think, Pam. Is document preservation eligible as opposed to building preservation or other items?
That's, yeah, definitely. We can,
I mean,
Stuart, yeah.
For me, conceptually it is, but I can also see Bob's point that, it is different. So it's our history and I think it needs to be preserved, but is it historic preservation relative to what the CPA does? Okay. Shall we move on to the Gloucester Meeting House Foundation project?
Another church.
So this has the distinction of being the largest project financially on the proposal list this year. Just under $340,000 total project cost. They've requested $130,000 from the CPC, which is 38% of the budget. It's Well, it's fairly substantial. It has a lot to do with the front of the building and the grand alley coming up to it. We had a great presentation from Charles Nazarian when we did the presentations at last meeting. So I think we all know the project pretty well. Would anybody like to comment, question? How's everybody feel about the Gloucester Meeting House project?
I'm fine with it. I think that it's one of these things where they have historically, going all the way back to city meetings that were held there. And that's where the Meeting House name comes into being here. And I do think that it's an important thing for the community, that the structure is historic, not only for the fact that it's connected to a church, but it's connected to our history in our community. And it means so much that way that I feel that becomes the focus, and not so much the fact that it might be a religious building, and that it's actually used for much more than a worship place of worship. I feel that there's so much that goes on there. And I think it's something that needs to be supported for that reason.
Definitely, I think you were going to say something as well.
I'm tipping towards wanting to play a little bit devil's advocate. Since this is such an important building on many levels, including to the greater practice of the denomination, and a historic building in itself, I wonder, do they possibly have other sources of funding? You know, can they we're here, we're sympathetic, we're easy. Is there other funding that they might go to if we can't do the whole thing that they've asked us for? You know, it just seems to me that they might have other sources that they could call on before us, for at least some of it. That's just a
That can be,
point.
that can actually be true for just about everything we do, Jennifer. Every organization that we fund has other ways to get money, because we're not funding their operations. And you know, donations come in for various reasons from various places. The Meeting House is actually on the historic register, if I'm not mistaken.
Exactly.
So it is eligible for funding, but we're not being asked to do the whole thing. We're being asked to do a portion of it. Any structure of historic significance has to have upkeep. You know, it's like, I think somebody said, if you're going to raise dinosaurs, you have to keep feeding them what they're used to eating. And it's a matter of what we actually fund. I think we have funded structural things with the Meeting House.
Sure.
We certainly have helped provide handicapped restrooms, lavatories, and access projects.
Yep.
And the Meeting House is certainly used for a lot of community purposes, well beyond any religious purposes. It has really been a major factor for meetings and discussions, well beyond any religious affiliation situations. So I still think it's worth giving them some support, not just cutting it off.
And personally, I will agree with you. They do a lot of music inside and outside. And I believe personally that they should be. I'm bringing up just some points.
Yeah, we understand.
That's it.
Yeah. I have a couple of quick things on that. One is, I was just looking at their budget. So the larger piece of their project budget is planned to be paid for with a grant from Save America's Treasures. They've applied for that grant. They have not been awarded that grant yet. And that's for $170,000. And they have other grant applications that they are also pursuing on a much smaller level. So it's, yeah, I mean, I think some places are better at fundraising than others, right? I mean, these guys are really good at it. I think they do a good job, and I don't have a problem with the amount of money that we're in. The devil's advocate concern I have is that this is way more than just the building. This is the entire Meeting House front lawn, and a complete re-landscaping of that grand alley with replacing the existing trees with new trees. So that part concerns me a little bit, and I'm not, I mean, I think you could probably make sure that CPA monies were directed towards preservation of the building. I mean, is the green itself, I guess the green itself is part of the historic item, right? It's in the historic, it's in the National Historic Landmarks, right? So there goes my devil's advocate. I guess I'm fine with it. I was also a little concerned originally that the plan they had was deviating from the original front of the building. But I looked into that more and I was wrong. It's a really nice plan. It's really well done, and never should have doubted Charles in the first place. It's so I like the project. I think it's really solid. Oh,
And Matt,
sorry, wait, one more thing. With respect to the issue we were talking about with Annisquam Village Church, I don't think it has any problems at all with that. I mean, it's so, as you said, Hank and Jennifer Lee, it's really much more a public institution than it is a religious institution. And the work they're doing has nothing at all to do with the religious aspect of what they do. Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I'm actually more comfortable myself with the fact that it is that open space and the green area versus putting money into putting into the church building itself. If that was an issue, and you're right, I think that, you know, it does touch on not only recreation, the community, and open space. Although it's not, you know, it's not part of it's more of a historic preservation application, but it's used in so many different ways.
Pam?
I have a quick question, and this might be towards Jamie or, in the past, I feel like when John was on the committee, he always referenced that we prefer to have CPA funds directed at the contingencies on the budget, just so that, like, if that money's not spent, that it is CPA money that's not spent. Is that, Jamie, is that right? Or is that, I don't know. John came to mind.
I mean, for me, administratively, it makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of wrap it up specifically in contingency, and all of the contracts state that other funding sources, if available, should be utilized prior to CPC funding,
Okay.
right? Which I'm sure federal grants say the same thing. So we're kind of always, you know, at odds with that. Like, well, if both of us say use ours last, who really gets to be last? But so I think we kind of have that in there so that, you know, we're not running into this place where if people get $1 million grant, they're returning grant funds as opposed to, you know, underspending CPC. But I think that clause kind of covers us. I've never seen a major construction project not go through their contingency anyway.
Okay.
Right, especially historic buildings. So I'm obviously I'm happy to do whatever the committee is comfortable with. I don't think that it offered as much of a security net as was the original thought behind it.
Okay, no, that makes so much sense. That makes me feel better about it.
Yep.
Anybody else?
There is a hand raised from the audience for this one. If the
Excellent.
committee is done.
Right. Jamie, can you activate them, and whoever it is, state your name and address for the record?
So I have Jennifer Hale. I have given you permission to speak, but you'll have to unmute yourself, and then you should be able to address the committee.
Excellent. I just got to bring up my notes. Hi, my name is Jennifer Hale. I live at 20 Gould Court, next to the Unitarian Universalist Church. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep, okay, excellent. I do have two comments about this particular application. First, I am opposed to my taxpayer money going to a church. It is a church. The Meeting House Foundation is raising money to rehab a church. The church has an active congregation that meets weekly, and the church owns the building and the green. The church is the main beneficiary. The church congregation parks on the green for their, if you're looking specifically at this particular application, the church parks on the green. And also now the church has their services on the green every Sunday. And then second, I, again, live next to the church, and the church and the Meeting House Foundation haven't adequately communicated their plans, which seem to be part of a much bigger project to this neighborhood. In the past, they haven't communicated their plans, and they have acted without consideration for the neighborhood. This has changed the nature of this neighborhood significantly in negative ways. When these concerns have been raised, they have consistently shown disregard for the neighborhood concerns. This neighborhood is zoned residential. The concerts that they're currently having are very loud and disruptive. The neighborhood does not have a choice whether to attend these concerts or not. And they are scheduled for every Friday of the summer. So that's just one of the projects that they're working on that they have not consulted with the neighborhood. And all this comes in addition to the noise it's on top of the noise of the whole week of noise and disruption from the church's tenant. Charles was talking about theater performances of up to 500 people outside in a residential neighborhood with amplified music. And it was just a little stunning because they have not talked with the neighborhood about it. And that's it.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer, if I could ask you a question, is there, are there other, you said they haven't communicated their plans, which are bigger, and I know about the concert one. Is there something else that was also that you had in mind that they had done or was planning to do?
In the past, they changed the nature and the flow in this neighborhood completely when they took down the stone wall at the end of Gould Court. It was part of their 2010 ADA part that they got from the CPC. It's changed the whole nature of the neighborhood. So we are now the service entrance for the church, smoking lounge, cut through. People use it to turn around. We've had our porch hit multiple times, so on and so forth. So that's one big thing. Yeah, and there's been others. So yeah, just in general, they have not communicated any of this.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your input.
Thank
Committee,
you.
We'll definitely take it into consideration.
Also, I just had one quick question. There were other neighbors that it wasn't clear that this was the community comment section of this process, and there are other neighbors that have concerns as well. If they have concerns, should they email you with them?
Yes, and
Okay.
Jamie, what's the correct email address to use for that?
They can go directly to me. So it's just J Corliss, JCORLISS at Gloucester-MA.gov. I believe that should be pretty easy to find on the city's website if you have any issues with that.
Excellent. Nope, I'll look for that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think there's a link to you on the CPA page. Yeah, that'd be great. You want to say that one more time, Jamie, your email address?
Yeah, of course. J Corliss, JCORLISS at Gloucester-MA.gov.
Thank you.
Yep.
It surprises me a bit that they don't open up to other people. I don't understand how they're restricting attendance at their outdoor activities. Most churches are more than happy and organizations that to open up to the general public. I'm a little surprised to hear what Jennifer Hale had to say, because it doesn't sound like a normal activity to restrict it to any particular group. It's usually open, when they do public presentations, it's usually open to whoever comes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't say that they restricted access. I'm saying that the church and the foundation have not talked with the neighborhood, have not met with the neighborhood to tell the neighborhood of their plans
Oh.
for the, it's significant. The scale of their plans are significant from what it is now, from what it has been in the past, and they have not talked with the neighborhood.
Thank you.
All right. Any other hands raised, Jamie?
There is. Let me. Jamie, I have given you permission to speak.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Hi, my name's Jamie Sroy. I also live at 20 Gold Court, and I'd like to comment, in support of what Jennifer has said on all of her points. I'm uncomfortable with public funds going to the renovation of a church property. It's for the Gloucester Meeting House, but as Jennifer noted, the prime beneficiary is the church, and they own the building and the green. And as a resident in this neighborhood living near the church, I can also confirm that the church and meeting house have not done a great job of engaging the neighborhood as they've embarked on some of these projects. And the things that they've done, they have changed the nature of the neighborhood, not always for the positive. And I think they need to slow things down a bit. And, before getting public funding, they need to consult with people around here about the plans. Like Jennifer said, the idea of having 500 people, concert or theater events in a high density residential neighborhood is, a bit alarming. And it's just, they need to make a better effort to get support of the neighborhood on and buy in on these plans.
Jamie, thank you. I appreciate your comments and Jennifer's as well. Committee, any comments to Jamie's?
Yeah, I'm happy to kind of touch base with Charles. He was they were my project this year. So I'm happy to touch base with Charles, kind of mention these concerns and see if there's anything that they plan to do, or just to come back to the committee with some comments from him.
I have also.
Yes, Jennifer Lee.
When there are public performances like this, are there not permits that have to be pulled from the city? And is there not a process at that time for public comment?
Can I answer your question?
Please.
So to the best of my knowledge, in Gloucester, if you're having an event in a public area, in a public space, if you were to do it on Stage 4 Park, or, for example, the block parties that happen downtown on Main Street, then you have to go before the special events permitting committee to get a permit. But to the best of my knowledge, if you're on if you're doing a private function on private property, you don't have to. There may be some rules about alcohol or food that I'm not entirely sure of, but generally you don't need to get a special events permit if you're doing it on private property. And so because the church, is private property, there's no permitting required.
Okay, I would think we should check that. And as far as what I'm hearing about this wall being torn down, isn't that the kind of thing that has to go through committees to get permission? And are not the neighbors questioned at that time?
I can tell you what I know of the history in this particular example. I understand neighbors have told me, we weren't here at the time, this was about 10 years ago, that the city was doing some work on either sewer or water lines down through Washington Street and some adjacent streets. And contractors they had hired did work on Gould Court. And to do that work, to accomplish that work, they took down a wall that had been on, at the end of Gould Court, which is still there. It still separates other property lines, but it was the wall at the end of the actual street. So they took it down to do their work, and they did not put it back up. And I understand that was done through some negotiation. As far as I understand it, to the best of my knowledge, it didn't involve any neighborhood consent. That it was, something managed between the church and those contractors. So, but you may want to look into it, more than that. That's as much as I've heard.
Huh.
Thanks, Jamie.
So it used to be a dead end street, and but now it's it's a thoroughfare, not for vehicles, although the vehicle traffic has definitely increased over the years as the church has tenants who use the facility. And yeah, you have big delivery trucks come down here on a tiny little dead end, and so it's people aren't happy about it.
Did they do it for the purpose of fire trucks being able to get in?
My understanding is they wanted to create a parking area. Prior to the wall coming down, it was just another part of the green, an extension of the green. But they excavated and removed soil and created a parking lot. And I think they also added some ADA elements in the entrance that was there.
So again, any construction like that, it has to go through committees, doesn't it?
I can only tell you what I know.
I'm asking other committee members.
I would think so, Jennifer. And wouldn't the project that the meeting house project, if approved, have to go through planning board, Hank?
It depends. Depends on any number of things. That would, but it might need to get a permit from inspection services or something like that. But but it depends on the nature of the project as to whether it would go through planning board or not.
Jamie, thank you for your input. We appreciate it. Jamie, anybody else with a hand raised?
Not at this time.
Okay. Then we will move to the next project on the list, which is the Hammond Museum project. This was to restore the archways. It's a $110,000 request, which is 50% of the total project cost. Comments?
We did a project recently, I think, on the color story.
Right.
So this is an additional project in the same general.
Yep. And that one, they came back for an off-cycle emergency because at the end of the project they uncovered a lot of rot, which needed to be addressed immediately. And that was just when I joined the committee. My feeling was that they're really well professionally managed, and they handled that well. My concern with this project was that, is there an opportunity for that as well? I mean, you never know what you don't know until you get in sometimes, but I think this one's more straightforward. I think everything's kind of in view. So anyway, that's my 2 cents.
All right, I'm the one who asks these weird questions, so here goes. So the Hammond Museum, the Hammond Castle Museum, to call this historic preservation is a little iffy in my opinion, in terms of, is this history we're preserving? Is it, I mean, do you see what I'm getting at? The whole place is a hodgepodge anyway. It was pieces taken from there. It's not like with something like a greenhouse, that was the original building and it had its purpose and it's been here for all this time. And the castle is a collection of actually artifacts that probably belong somewhere else. But aside from that, of this particular part that is being requested, the arches, is that what we're talking about?
Mhm.
Yes.
The arches, is that technically preservation? Is that technically, I mean, do we have to be historic preservation, or can it, what's our bottom line definition of preservation?
It's a very fair question, Jennifer Lee. Yeah, I don't, it's funny, I don't know quite how I feel about it.
Yeah, me either, because I love the place.
Right.
It's not the McDonald's arches, but it's something that was put there. Where did it come from? What's its purpose? It's pretty, it's great for taking pictures in front of. And what makes it historic preservation?
Right. Right.
It belonged to Charles Hammond. That's why.
Well, yeah, but the poor guy didn't, yeah. Well, was that part there with him?
The archway, yeah, he built the arches. I'm fairly certain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, to kind of jump in on that, I guess in our conversation with Chip today, he made a note of, like, for example, in the meeting house, if the columns in the front of the building were about to collapse and you need to put new columns in so the building doesn't collapse, like that would kind of count towards historic preservation, even though technically, like, you're just trying to maintain the building. So I guess in this sense, maybe you could apply the same thing, like in their application, at least they say like repairing or whatever, restoring the archways is kind of maintaining the space, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to say it. So I don't know.
I mean, I do think that preserving the archways is important to the museum itself, but I think that Jennifer is raising a very legitimate point, like how historic. I mean, I'm not, are they on the historic register? I don't think so. Are they, I don't even know if they're a nonprofit or not. I'm not sure of that, but I get what you're saying. My concern with this is that I feel, in looking back at how much has been asked by Hammond of this committee, I feel like we're a bank account for them. And I wonder how much are we a bank account for them? And yeah, I mean, I think I would wonder if it starts to get abused at some point. And I think it's a legitimate question to think about and to take a close look at, for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Just, and I'm not saying we shouldn't, is there a different amount of money that we could offer? Is there, I'm just looking at it in terms of our whole budget, in terms of who else needs money, or that's all. Just
Yeah.
question. question.
Anybody else?
I think the arches are historic. And I think that they would qualify for that reason. The function of things that are historic are sometimes not necessarily so physical as they are in the what they create to the entire structure. So I do think that the arches are important to the upkeep. And I think it's a legitimate application. Is whether we can fund it or not will depend on how strongly we feel with the funds we have available. But I do think that it would qualify for historic purposes of restoration.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it is on the National Register of Historic Places. I mean, it's like the pornography question, Jennifer Lee, right? I can't define it, but I know what it is. I think you raised the bigger question, which is it's a lot of money, and I think it's the hard thing that we wrestle with is we have limited resources. Where do we deploy them? And that's I think the question for us to ponder as we think about how to vote on this.
It was like 2 years ago, the Y wanted $200,000 for the splashing pool thing. And I voted against it because I thought that was a lot of money to put for something that had, in my opinion, it did not benefit the whole community. I just think that maybe 110,000 for that particular piece might be more than we want. This is hard to say because sure we like it, all of that, but just maybe a little less money, maybe.
Yeah, I just took a quick look at the application, and they are 12th and 13th century artifacts that he brought over and incorporated into. So they certainly are worthy of preserving, but I agree. I feel like there's just been a lot of money thrown that way, and it's something to take a close look at.
All right. Jamie, anybody got their hand up?
Not at this time.
All right, then we shall move along. Next up is the Ocean Alliance project, which, just to review, is, I'm waiting for the basics. There we go. They are requesting $151,000 for a $263,500 project. Just over half of their project is being requested from the CPC. And as discussed previously, this is to fund planning and permitting process and produce environmental and architectural plans that will be necessary, excuse me, for them to apply for their end goal project, which is a complete restoration of the main building at the paint factory and then some. Comments, questions? I throw it open. Who would like to go first?
Well, this is a nice piggyback discussion, the one we just had on Hammond Castle, because Carrie and I actually did a site visit to the Ocean Alliance, and I love the building. It's a 160-year landmark, iconic building here in Gloucester. But at the same time, you think of the Ocean Alliance, and I mean, that's a lot of money for a being requested of the CPA. And we just did give them a grant for the seawall, which they've completed. So I think some of the same questions that we just talked about as far as Hammond Castle applies to this one as well, Matt, and the rest of the committee. It's a lot of money. And I think they do have other ways to raise money as well. I know that the gentleman who heads up the Ocean Alliance made the point to us that his donors want to give money for whale research, not to restore buildings. And we are giving money towards a planning and permitting process, not actually restoring the building. But again, that's the first step of a multi-million-dollar project. Those are my thoughts.
You know, to piggyback on that, I just clarify a little bit more strongly, we're funding them so they can get to the point where they can really start to fundraise to finish off what they need to do there and what they want to be doing going forward with their whale research. So they can't do any of that until they get through this permitting process, which is, I mean, I forget what that price.
I think it was 256,000 for the whole.
$250,000. Okay, yeah.
No, we did fund planning for the restoration at Stageport Park. You know, the pathway and that, I don't know, was that last year or the year before? We did fund the development of plans and, well, that much I can remember to say. So we have done this before.
I'm not, Jennifer, I'm not opposed to doing it. And I think, but I think it's the cost of the project that I think we have to consider.
Yeah.
In the overall.
I agree. I mean, I'm in full favor of doing it to get them to the point where they can really start to raise some serious funds to get them where they need to be. Obviously, it's a big ask. It's a lot of money, and we'll have to.
Bill and Carrie, I keep forgetting to ask this, but does anybody know why their request in the eligibility phase? I believe their request was only $100,000, and then it went up to 150 by the time we got their final application.
I'm not sure, but I know at some point they were told that they had to do the permitting and the plans for the entire project that they want to do. At first, they were starting to just look at it piecemeal, but I think it was the EPA required them to give, like, they want it all. They want to see the entire project and what's coming down the road, like including parking that's planned for the future off to the side. And so I'm not sure that that's what the increase was from, but it appeared to me at the time that that's probably why it had, that they just had to go, they had to make sure that they were incorporating everything that they planned to do for the permitting process.
This project's been bothering me a little bit, and I had a couple of thoughts I wanted to share with you on it. One was, we had a similar one in Acton when I was there, and that one was a recreation project. It was a rail trail project. It was an old rail line that ran through Acton and north up to Chelmsford and Billerica, I think. Anyway, wanted to change it into a rail trail, but there were state funds that could be unlocked once you had a certain number of criteria established for it. And it was a huge match. I mean, the state would fund 90% of it, but they had to get plenty of their documentation in place. This one's similar to me. I mean, if I recall from our previous meeting where they did their presentation, I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to spend $10 million on getting all this stuff done. And they're expecting a lot of that money to come from the state once they have these plans in place. So I get the concept. The problem I have with it is that it is iconic, it is historic, but this whole plan is not historic. It's almost an economic development plan. And that's not a bad thing. I'm just not sure it's right to fund it with CPC money.
I don't remember if I asked it for that project, but I remember I said at some point I asked somebody, so if we get you started and then you get your millions, how about giving some of it back to us? Is that
you asked that on this project. Yeah.
It was this project.
Yeah.
And I mean, why not? Are we not allowed to do that?
Jamie, I don't think that CPA funds work that way, but Jamie, do you know anything more about that?
I mean, I have no experience with applicants post-award refunding money. I wouldn't know where to even begin to like
Yeah.
operate a mechanism like that.
Yeah, I think it's a grant, and once they satisfy the requirements of the grant, that it would be an unusual. We could ask Chip. I think. I mean, it's an agreement. I mean, you can write any kind of legal agreement you want, but I'm not sure if it gets tangled up in the CPA itself.
No, but just thinking outside the box, just
Mhm.
or some version of paying it forward, or
Right.
you know, and it may not be in the works now, but
I-
maybe we could see if there's room to.
You know, we did not push on this after you brought it up last time. I think we should, because that gets over my problem with this. I just think it's an awful lot of money, and it's an awful lot of money, and it may not be. It doesn't have as a strong affinity of historic preservation as some other projects do that are purely historic preservation. And again, it's not a bad thing. I would love to see that building restored and be a center of a research center for maritime research. I just don't know if that's CPC money. So if it could be refunded, that would solve my problem.
Or
Let's ask Chip. I feel like Chip's like Mikey. He'll, have Mikey try it.
And Matt, the other point in their request, when they outline their expenses, I only saw 121,000 of CPA request in their project expenses. Because
Yeah, that
the
was a
point-
mistake, I think, on their part. We're also, because I think we talked about this the last one, we're also covering the soft costs. So it's another 30,000 tacked on.
Okay, that's where the other 30 came. Thanks.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, Bill.
No, I'm glad you pointed, because I was trying to remember what they said on that, and I had it in my notes that, it was only 121 on the request,
Yeah.
but thanks.
Well, all right, let's ask Chip about that process and I don't know, the percentage of total funds and the other reservations. We might want to have them relook at the budget before final decisions, I think. Anybody else? Jamie? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jennifer Lee.
the last point is, we're funding them to put together a package to then try and get more funding. It's not like if we give them this, then they can definitely do what they want to do.
Well, so that's true, but that is true. However, Ian pretty much assured us that he's got the money lined up. He's got the people, and Chip, you had mentioned that it was state funding. It's not state funding. It's all private funding. Most of the 10 million. And
Really?
yeah, and he's got, according to him, he's got people that are ready to write checks, but they're not writing it for the restoration. They're writing it for the research. So
Right.
if we can believe what he's saying, which is no reason why I wouldn't believe him, it sounds like he just has to get that permitting, get to the point where he can start to get his people in place, and he should be able to get that money fairly easily.
Oh.
That's what bothers me. If
Yes.
he can get 10 million out of them, why can't he get 150,000 out of them? I just don't quite get it. Sorry.
Yeah. I agree.
And I love the project too, and I love the place and all that, but
Okay. Well, I think we've got a question for Chip, and we may want to have a chat with them about the budget.
thank you.
I mean, yeah. Okay. Jamie, any public folks from the public with their hands raised?
Not at this time.
Any other comments from the committee? All right, onwards. We go to the Saunders House murals application. I think this one's pretty I mean, I don't need to provide a summary on this one. Any questions or comments at all? It's a 50% fund on the whole project, with the library funding the balance. Comments?
Love it.
Yeah, I struggle to find anything wrong with this one. It's, I guess I can't, I don't find anything wrong with it. I would love to try, I like to try to find something to object to all the time, but this one's pretty straightforward. No? Unless anyone else feels differently. Jamie, anybody from the public with their hands raised?
Nope.
All right, onwards. Nice to have something non-controversial. The Schooner Adventure and their keel. So this was $25,000 total, asking for 20 from us to pull the keel, right? Is it the keel? Yeah. Oh, the rudder, sorry, the rudder. To fix it up during haul out in 2022. Private donors covering the rest of it. Comments? Good. Anybody from the public, Jamie?
Nope.
All right. Well, then we're going to move along. That brings us to the last one, which is the trustees of reservations, improving the parking facility at Ravenswood Park. 63% of project funding, 37.7 from CPA, total cost just under $60,000. The balance of their budgets coming from the trustees themselves. Comments?
Well, this is the only one we have that is not historic preservation, recreation.
That's right.
Isn't it open space?
That's a good question. I think you could kind of call it either or, right?
Yeah.
How do we categorize it, Jamie? Do you remember? I'm looking at my notes. My notes say recreation.
It's checked recreation on the application, so.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think an open space application would typically be for acquisition of open space,
Okay.
perhaps. So anything else probably falls into recreation. Excuse me. Yeah, well, I will say this. It's pretty clear what they want to do here, right? I thought their application was really well done and very clear. And the presentation was good too. I don't have a lot again to add. Anybody else?
I agree. I think it's a kind of clear cut. I went over there to take a look at it after he presented, and I could envision what they were saying. And I think it's great. I think it's well thought out. I think they know what they're doing. And I think it's something that's well needed, especially, I think they said there's something like 60,000 people that go through there each year. I mean, that's incredible to me.
I know. And I like, just the only other comment, I guess, I like the scale of what they did. I'm not a hugely frequent visitor, but I'm probably up there 4 or 5 times a year. And there's always overflow parking on the side of the road, which is, if you've ever parked there, it's just terrifying.
Yeah.
But there's never more than maybe 5 or 10 cars, and the expansion is just about what it, I think, needs to be. So we shall see. Jamie, anybody from the public with a hand raised?
Nope.
I
All
just wanted to chime in on that Ravenswood because I was the liaison, and I just wanted to add that the schools use it for cross-country meets as well. So there is the youth element and connection to schools. So, you know, there's busloads of kids that come there and run through using that as a cross-country course. So just wanted to throw that in there.
And they've been doing that since I was in school.
Wow. Last century. I mean, last millennium.
Last century.
The last century. All of us were here in the last century.
It's true. I know. Yeah. So. Wow.
All right, well, that concludes our project list. I think this is a solid meeting, and I'm glad we had a little bit of public input on the Meeting House project. I think there's definitely things to consider there. We've got a few follow-ups that I have in my notes. I think that's good. So now we go home and think and consider and be ready to vote on projects come September 21st.
So Matt, I have a question.
Yeah, Bill.
Or a couple of comments. Number one, I know Pam, you mentioned it kind of concerned me a little bit hearing from the neighbors at the Meeting House. I'm surprised that the Meeting House had not reached out to the neighbors for some of these projects. And Pam, I think I would like to do a site visit to that because I'm not familiar with that. And I know, Pam, you were the liaison on that one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you wanted to set that up at some point or we do that on our own.
I'm
Any
happy
thoughts?
to loop you in and kind of touch base with Charles about it. Yeah, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I would love to. And I'm pretty flexible, you know,
Okay.
as long as I don't have grandkids. And then the other comment I had was, you know, I roughly added up all our requests. It's about 600,000. And Jamie was kind enough to send us the budget. And being new to this whole process, looking at what she sent, I think we have about 760,000 in the budget, but I think we're restricted to some of the money we can spend. So maybe you could give us, you know, at least me, and we can do this offline if you think, an idea of, you know, what we have to work with.
Sure. So I know that form is not always necessarily very straightforward. So, and it's funny because the CPA funds, if they don't get expended, they stay in the fund balance to then be allocated later. So there's actually about 1.5 million in the fund balance that was, you know, certified through the free cash process last year. And then this year there was the city auditor estimated that the CPA should receive about 760,000 additional funding, right? So you know, there's about $1.5 million in cash that's, you know, sitting in the accounts in the fund balances, and then we anticipate 760,000. So we're kind of allowed to expend that as well because that's what is projected.
So that would put us at over 2 million.
Correct.
Okay.
And within that, the 760,000 gets broken down and budgeted, you know, right off the top. 10% goes to open space, 10% goes to community housing, and then about 200,000 goes towards historic preservation debt service. And then 5% gets budgeted for administrative expenses. And when those balances don't get expended, they roll into reserves for those purposes. So that 1.5 million breaks down to about 1.3, almost 1.4 million unrestricted, right? So that means for any of the CPA eligible purposes.
Okay.
All of the reserved budgets they tend to be pretty small. Open space is, you know, that $1,700 number. Community housing is the almost 200,000, and historic preservation has stayed at 800 for as long as I've been here because all the reserves go towards the historical debt service. So the breakdown is we have 1.5 now. We anticipate adding 760,000 to that, and of that 1.3, almost 1.4 is fully unrestricted.
Okay. And when you say debt service, historic preservation, what do you mean by debt service?
So approximately, I want to say 12 years ago now, a bond was taken out for the historical preservation of City Hall. And so the way CPC funds were awarded, it was kind of in the future to pay down that bond. So right off the top, that bond commitment comes right out of the each year's anticipated budget.
I understand now. Thank you.
No problem.
And how much do we have of this 1.3 or what 1.5 we have do we have allocated for funds that have been approved but not spent?
They have already been excluded from that. So that is unrestricted, unencumbered, up for allocation.
Okay. Thank you. That was a quick and precise explanation for me.
Yes, happy to provide it.
Jamie, this could just be a dumb question. The city hall debt service for that bond, does that take care of the 10% that we're required to spend for, or not, like that 10% that's allocated for historic preservation every year?
Yes, so it meets the 10% required by state legislation that is allocated to historic preservation. So
Okay.
yeah, and it like exceeds it every year.
So in short, we have more money than we're planning on dispersing this year. And I guess the only other comment I had is not relative to what we've got in front of us this year, but in general, you know, the slate of applications this year being, you know, virtually all historic preservation. I would love, I don't know if it's our role. I think it is our role. It's our role to promote and encourage projects that are relevant from the other funding locations. And that kind of comes full circle back to my first comment, Heidi, on the survey. I would love. Have we funded anything? And I know we in Gloucester, open space and recreation are managed and thought of as one, but have we funded any open space? I mean, purely open space projects that were acquisitions of space or something like that. I don't think we have. If we have, I've gone through the old projects, but I didn't see anything that jumped out at me.
I don't think that we have open space. I think it's just been recreation.
Got it.
And I know Hank was on before me. Jamie, you took over for, I can't remember her name, Deb?
Deb,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, Deb. So but I feel like open space has not been even an application, let alone like an application that didn't meet qualifications. So, yeah.
Camp Spindrift. Did Camp Spindrift use some money for open spaces, or was that?
I think that would be recreation.
Was it only recreation?
I believe so. And did we award them money or did we not? I thought we did not. Or
We did. There was funding awarded.
okay.
But there was an instance, you know, like there was a project to preserve a portion of the back shore when there was a
Right.
proposed development. And so CPC funds were awarded to that, but they ended up being rescinded because that was like a complicated thing that I kind of came in halfway through. But and my understanding is that open space things tend to be, you know, if Essex County Greenbelt
Gloucester-
needs funding to preserve it or to put in restrictions for use, that is one way that CPC funding goes towards open space.
Gloucester has more open space than virtually any other community of its size. We have a huge amount of open space. So acquiring additional open space is not a high priority because we have so much of it to deal with already.
And yet I will just say Salt Island is in the news right now.
Oh, yeah.
And there's concerns about that.
Yeah.
It is an integral part of the Good Harbor experience, I would say, or Gloucester. It's a part of the Good Harbor identity and landscape. And so I think that I came in right at the Save Our Shores, the back shore acquisition. Like that was, I think, my first meeting of CPC. So thank you for reminding me of that. But yeah, it to your point, yes, Hank, and also yes, Matt. I think that open space sometimes feels like, oh, it's just woods, but access is often to keep in mind, and protection from development or protection from future things. So
Yeah, so it's not quantity, it's targeted. I mean, I get, yeah, you're both right. It's interesting.
yeah.
Well, food for thought, I think. It would be nice to see some projects from other quarters. Good. Unless there's anything else on the project review for this year, our next And our only last agenda item is our next meeting, which is scheduled for September 21st, 2021. And at that
Yes.
meeting, we will we will vote on funding for these projects. In the interim, I think we've got a few homework items. Jamie, I'm going to, and Pam, I want to make sure that whatever we do between now and the 21st, we are, fully compliant with open meeting law. I mean, if there's things that we need to discuss with applicants about their funding levels or moving things around, I just want to make sure we do that the right way. So I may come back to you and or Chip about that, contacting applicants and things that materially change their applications. So
Yeah,
some of that-
especially given the recent news out of Manchester, I think that is diligent. I don't believe there's any issue, especially the nature of our applications are like different than zoning typically,
Right.
but and as long as it isn't you all discussing amongst each other via email is usually
Right.
the point. But yes, I'm always happy to say, please clarify with legal counsel, because that is not my expertise. I did, before we wrap up, because we're definitely heading that way, I received a call yesterday from Carl Ellis from the Young Legends Street Hockey to say it has not been official, so we can't really publicize it, but he wanted you all to be some of the first to know that the Boston Bruins Association has committed to donating $100,000 to
Oh, wow.
the rink. So they have reached $341,000 of their fundraising. So they're very close to their $400,000 target. So they were really
Right.
excited, and he really wanted to share that. I appreciate that so much. They've really been great about communicating. And that was like, yay, good news.
It's great news.
Um,
Fantastic.
and my other question is, I know that Matt or Pam, sorry, one of you had been contacted by the mayor's office about returning to in-person meetings. So I didn't know if that was something that we wanted to get general consensus about, because I think September 15th is the next kind of date where they anticipate opening that stuff back up. So if we want to think about returning to in-person, what does that look like for you? When does that look like? Do you think we'd be prepared for that in September? Because for me, logistically, that means some things.
Yep. And it was me. I was called by the mayor's office, and I told them, based on our previous meeting, that when they're ready to go in person, we were all in favor of that. Now, that was a couple of weeks ago. I'm not so sure I'd feel the same way now, but I'm glad you brought it up, Jamie. How does everybody feel about meeting in person on September 21st?
Depends on where it is.
We all stay 6 feet apart and wear masks.
Yeah. I think, and I haven't talked to the city since then. I think that that maybe they're going to revisit that. I don't know, but Bob, did you want to say something?
Yes, I would say that we want to watch very carefully, see what's going on. I think that we started moving ahead, that we were getting together, people that have been vaccinated without masks. Now there seems to be a importance of when you are in with other people indoors, you should be wearing a mask. I think that if we're at that point, I think we ought to probably continue with a Zoom meeting, and if that's the case, and we are getting pretty close, over a month and a half to the next meeting. So I think we watch and see what's going on. I have a feeling that we're going to have some restrictions, and the Zoom meeting might be necessary.
Yeah, I agree. I didn't agree a week ago, but things are still moving fast. So plus, for what we're doing, I mean, I would love to see you all in person, but another month probably is a good idea at this point with the way Delta's heading. Agreed?
I would agree. I would agree. I
agree.
think at this
I would
stage of the game, keeping it a Zoom and see how things play out between now and then.
Okay. Well, Jamie, shall I call Enza or anybody else in the mayor's office to let them know that we've changed our mind and we're going to meet remotely on the 21st?
Probably just because they did kind of their own outreach.
Yep.
It might be beneficial to say.
Right. And I'll also say that when we do reconvene, you know, we've got a lot. We've got 8 people, and we want to be in a room where we can be 6 feet apart or more. So because that was the purpose of their call, was number one, see who wanted to meet in person. Number 2, figure out where they're going to put them.
Yes, that is something I have been wondering for a little while.
Yeah, and I'm just gonna add that I'm scheduled to go back to school on August 31st. So in Gloucester, I don't know what, like, right now I'm predicting wearing masks, but being in person with any number of, real humans. So I'm just saying that that's part of my profession and a change, but I also know that anything could happen between now and August 31st.
Yeah.
So I'm just staying flexible, and I think I like keeping it the same versus meeting in person and then going back to Zoom. So
Agreed.
thanks.
Good. So September 21st, virtual, and then we'll figure out what happens after that. All right.
Awesome.
I'll let them know in the mayor's office, and
Yeah.
that's it. So with that, we've completed our agenda for the, yes, Hank. Well, you're muted. I think you're muted, Hank. Hank's on mute. Hank, there you go.
Offer a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
I'll
Second,
second that.
Great. Roll call vote, I think, is required, Jamie?
I think so.
All righty. Hank McCarl, how would you vote you?
Aye.
Bill Cuff,
aye.
Pamela Toby,
Aye.
Heidi Wakeman,
Aye.
Carrie McKenna,
Aye.
Jennifer Lee Levitz,
Aye.
Bob Whitmarsh,
Aye.
Matt Lundberg, aye. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
See you next month.
See you on September 21st.
Enjoy the rest of the summer.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Okay.